the man who can give us more definitive answers on what kind of talent the Eagles got is Scott Wright from DraftCountdown.com. So we'll look at the Eagles draft and some of the other highlights from draft weekend from the president of DraftCountdown.com, Scott Wright, as he appears via the Boardwalk Honda hotline on one of the highest attended draft of all time and one of the most watched drafts ever across multiple platforms. Scott, the draft is as popular as ever, it looks like.
Record ratings and viewership. I just saw on Twitter the NFL announced. It amazes me, and I'm so happy. I mean, I certainly can see what everybody loves about it, but I can only liken it to what all the comic book fans feel with seeing these blockbusters on movies now, how it just continues to grow. It's our little niche, our little corner of the world kind of become part of the mainstream zeitgeist.
Right. Andre Dillard's a guy we talked about on Friday's show, the offensive tackle for Philadelphia. You liked that pick. But do you think, the message from Howie Roseman? Was there a message from Howie? They only had 5 picks, but was he trying to get something accomplished with these 5 guys that you could tell?
Well, I think moving up for Dillard is just he was too good. When he started to fall, we said we have to go get him, and that's what the good teams do. Like you said, we talked about Friday. The good teams are aggressive, proactive, and they jumped ahead of the Texans and stole their guy, I think. So I really like that pick for Philly. But I think it's pretty clear, at least with their early picks, that they were looking to fill immediate holes. They want guys who are going to come in and contribute right away. I think Miles Sanders, the running back from Penn State, even though they went out and traded for Jordan Howard, I think Miles Sanders is going to play a huge role in that backfield and make a huge difference for that offense. He's kind of the Eagles have a bunch of guys who are good at certain things. He's kind of the best of both worlds. And then J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, the wide receiver from Stanford, they wanted to upgrade there. So all 3 of those guys are going to come in and address roles right away. Whereas on day 2, I think they went more with developmental long-term guys.
Yeah, let's go to Miles Sanders and give us what you think. Right away, you think he's going to have a huge role right away. But a lot of people in this area may have seen him Penn State running back. But is he the kind of guy that is more of a role player, or is he a guy that you can get out in the field a little bit more than that?
No, he was the clear-cut number 2 running back in this draft, and a one-year wonder, but the only reason he was a one-year wonder is because prior to that, he was stuck behind Saquon Barkley. That sounds like a pretty good excuse to me. And, if he had gone to a different situation, maybe he's a first-round pick because I think he's that type of talent, not only running the ball but catching it. So he's going to be a dynamic weapon in the backfield and one of the best all-around weapons they've had in the backfield for a while.
Miles Sanders, Penn State. He'll be back, he'll be fighting for time, I guess, with Jordan Howard. We'll see what kind of role he has. Tell us a little bit about Arcega-Whiteside. I mean, there's a lot of receivers in this draft that may have had, especially on the East Coast, him playing out at Stanford. His name doesn't get down to us here in New Jersey quite as quickly as some of the teams that are playing on this coast. But what kind of receiver do you see as him? A lot of people think that he could be the heir apparent to Alshon Jeffrey.
Yeah, and that's a good comparison, and has some of the same concerns coming out of college that Alshon Jeffrey did. He's that big receiver, and you wonder, a lot of his catches are contested, even in college, and you wonder if that's going to translate to the NFL. And sometimes it does, and Alshon Jeffrey is the best case scenario, but there's a lot of cases where it doesn't translate. But I think what enabled Arcega-Whiteside to still go on day 2 is he ran better than expected. He ran a 4.49 at his pro day, and at 6'2", 125 pounds. So he's really interesting. And at the very least, he's going to be a jump ball threat and a terror to deal with in the end zone because of those ball skills. Yeah,
it's interesting because the last couple of years, they went with like Shelton Gibson, Mac Hollins, and none of them have really worked out here. You wonder if Arcega-Whiteside is a guy that can get some playing time as a rookie.
I think he's got more talent than those guys you mentioned, and a little different player than Shelton Gibson, but he's like a rich man's Mac Hollins in terms of the type of wide receiver he is.
Yeah, Mac Hollins has been hurt a lot too, and really had been billed as a special teams guy before a wide receiver. So J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, the wide receiver from Stanford. Sharif Miller's interesting, defensive end, another Penn State guy. And, defensive end, they got Brandon Graham. They brought back Vinnie Curry. Chris Long has kind of said, I might not play. But they're aging on the end. They got Derek Barnett. But is Miller, they've gone and gotten some guys later on in the draft the last couple of years. But is Miller a guy that in the fourth round you think can see playing time right away?
I think he's more of a long-term project. He's really long and rangy. He's got a good frame. He just needs to bulk up and get stronger. Good athleticism, though. He's just raw as the day is long. And reminds me a little bit of the guy they took in the fourth round last year, Josh Sweat. I thought Sweat was a better prospect, but Miller, I think he's more of a developmental guy. And I'll be surprised, I guess, if he's a big part of the rotation as a rookie. I think that's more of a long-term view and wishing upon what he can be down the road.
Yeah, and then the quarterback, Clayton Thorson, when you take a quarterback, all these people's eyes kind of raise up. Is he a guy that has, number 2 ability in the NFL?
Yeah, I think so. And he's kind of that big prototypical pocket passer. And one of those guys who's always been more highly thought of around the NFL than he was amongst, say, media and the draftnik community. And I'm kind of surprised he lasted to the 5th round. I had heard plenty of talk that he wasn't going to escape the top 100 in day 2. So injuries have kind of derailed him recently, but he's talented, and I think it'll be interesting to see what kind of run he gives Nate Sudfeld for that backup job, because Sudfeld's very highly thought of around the league. So it'll be interesting to see if Thorson can give him a run for his money, and if not, do they keep 3 quarterbacks?
All right, let's take a look at some of the highlights of the weekend. Scott Wright, draftcountdown.com with us here. Drew Lock heading to Denver. They had back-to-back picks there, and Drew Lock to Denver, and obviously they have tried at quarterback, and they finally make a trade for Joe Flacco. Now you're Flacco and somebody else. They draft another quarterback, so he's got to play with a quarterback behind him. But how about Drew Lock? Some people thought he could have been a first-round pick. Did you like Denver getting into that spot for Lock?
I really do like it. And at one point not that long ago, there was thoughts that maybe he could go to the Broncos at number 10 overall. And though that organization and that player have been linked to each other for months. I remember being down at the Senior Bowl in January, and that was the talk. John Elway loves Drew Lock. That's his quarterback he likes. So credit the Broncos for getting him with their 3rd pick way down the 2nd round, and a really talented guy. If Drew Lock hits, he has like number 1 overall pick type of upside potential. Now, that's a huge if, and there's a lot of risks, and that's why he's a boom or bust prospect. But considering the investment, I think that's a worthwhile roll of the dice. And if it doesn't work out, you can be back in the quarterback mix a year from now. I know that Joe Flacco isn't the long-term solution, and I'm not even sure he's the short-term solution. So I think Drew Lock will probably get on the field at some point this year, and for him, you couldn't ask for a better spot. I'm sure he's disappointed he fell a little bit, but he's going to an organization that believes in him, and that goes a long way.
Yeah, a couple guys I want to ask you about. Nasir Adderley, the safety from Delaware. He went late 2nd round. Taylor Rapp, another one from Washington, went late 2nd round. DK Metcalf, the wide receiver from Ole Miss, he went to the Seahawks. I had seen a lot of mock drafts that had those 3 players, some of them into the 1st round. Were you surprised at how far those 3 guys fell?
Well, not really. Metcalf, despite the crazy workouts, he wasn't as highly thought of in the league because he was so raw. He's got the health concerns, but I thought he'd be a 2nd round pick. Maybe he fell a little further into the 2nd round than I thought, going to the last pick around 2. But that didn't shock me. And Taylor Rapp, I thought he would fall too because he ran so poorly. He ran almost a 4.8. I mean, there's plenty of linebackers that run better than that. So that really hurt him and probably dropped him a round on draft day. But I was more surprised by Nasir Adderley from Delaware, and I think it was an injury. He tweaked a hamstring at his pro day. I think that might have hurt him a little bit. But, boy, that's one of my favorite picks in the entire draft, him going to the Chargers towards the end of round 2. I think it's a great value, and it's an outstanding fit. He's the perfect running mate for Derwin James. Their skill sets are going to complement each other perfectly. Adderley can play corner. He can play free safety. You can line him up in the slot. He's a playmaker back there. And my favorite thing about him, he was named a captain down at the Senior Bowl, and I've been going down there since 2005, and I don't know if I remember another instance of a small school player being named a captain. So for him to go in and earn that type of respect, I think that says something. So I love that pick for the Chargers.
Now, Scott, there was a lot of wideouts taken in the second round. Deebo Samuel, obviously we talked about Whiteside, A.J. Brown, Metcalf, Hardman, Paris Campbell, Andy Isabella from UMass, small school guy. The wide receivers in that second round there, who was your favorite of that group of guys in round two?
Yeah, and that's kind of what we expected. We expected there to be a run on wideouts late round one, early to mid round two. That's exactly how it wound up playing out. In terms of my personal favorite, I think the guy I had rated the highest was A.J. Brown from Ole Miss. Actually, I had DK Metcalf second. I went with the upside there, but it was really close, that 2-3 on what you're looking for. But the guy I would highlight from that group of receivers that went off the board in the second round is Mecole Hardman. Out of Georgia. This guy is going into an incredible opportunity, and if you're looking to replace Tyreek Hill, if you couldn't get Marquise Brown in the first round, this is your best option. Former cornerback, just an explosive athlete, 4.3 speed, and boy, there's going to be a lot of balls to go around there, and he gets to catch it from Patrick Mahomes, so he's going into a great spot, and boy, that guy might be a Rookie of the Year contender.
By the way, the first two picks, Byron Murphy, the corner from Washington, Rock Ya-Sin from Temple, Jawan Taylor, the offensive tackle, Deebo Samuel, who we're just talking about, those were all guys whose names we saw showing up in some mock drafts in the first round as well. And Jawan Taylor, he goes to Jacksonville, so he'll be there protecting Nick Foles, and he might have to be out in the field right away.
Yeah, absolutely, and they traded up to get him when he fell into the second round because they thought about taking him at number 7 overall before Josh Allen, the pass rusher from Kentucky, fell into their lap. So they got to have their cake and eat it too, and that was a great job of managing the draft from Jacksonville's perspective. But I think you made a really important point. Well into the second day of the draft, second round and third round, you were still getting players that at one point at least were being talked about as first rounders. So this draft, there were some good players at the top, but it was really more about the depth and quality throughout.
Yeah, Scott. Now, in the third round, was there anybody who fell down into the third round that maybe had some first round, grades, or that we had seen potentially as a first round talent?
Right at the very end or at any point throughout the process? Because at one point, Ja'Kai Polite, the outside linebacker from Florida, his tape is a top 20 quality tape. He's one of the best pure pass rushers in this draft.
He went to the Jets.
He went to the Jets in round 3. He just had disastrous workouts and also had some character concerns that pushed him down the board a little bit. But that's one guy who we thought not that long ago that might go really early. Jalen Ferguson, the defensive end from Louisiana Tech, the NCAA's all-time leading sack leader. Even after some poor pro day workouts, we thought maybe the back end of round 1, he was still available down there in round 3. So those guys are a couple guys that definitely stand out. But I could probably read off half a dozen that at one point were talked about as first round possibilities. Yeah. Chase Winovich, outside linebacker from Michigan, going to the Patriots. So really a strong draft, and I think that's why you saw teams so willing to trade down and stockpile that picks, not only on day 2 but day 3 as well.
Yeah, and I know I want to get your take on, we talk quarterbacks, Will Grier. I don't know that he was a first-round guy, but there was a lot of quarterbacks that just jump into the first round. What happened with him that did you expect him to be at the bottom of the third round? He ended up going to Carolina, who, by the way, Newton getting banged up. Grier is in a very interesting spot there because the backup spot there has not been very strong.
No, it's wide open, and you need to have a good insurance policy when Cam Newton is your quarterback, and that's where I thought he was going to go. I had him as a third rounder, and that's where I thought he'd come off the board. The quarterback I really like beyond the top grouping is Jarrett Stidham from Auburn going to the Patriots in the fourth round. Based on his 2017 tape, I thought he was more impressive than Drew Lock, than Justin Herbert from Oregon, who we're going to be talking about next year. Now, this past season was a disaster. He was a bad fit in the offense, and everything just kind of went downhill. But he really redeemed himself to a large degree during the pre-draft process at the Senior Bowl, at the scouting combine. And I think he landed in a great situation there. And a few years from now, the Patriots might have something on their hands.
Yeah, good stuff. Scott Wright, draftcountdown.com. We're looking back at the weekend. Hakeem Butler, I really liked him. He goes in the 4th round there to Arizona, 6'5", 227. We look at the wide receivers. He was a guy that I was really hoping Philadelphia ended up with. And then you look at Gary Jennings. That's a cool story, too. He's a wide receiver from West Virginia. He's going out to play in Seattle, where Russell Wilson, basketball coach when he was growing up. Benny Snell, running back from Kentucky. There were some bigger names and some interesting names in round 4.
In Arizona and Seattle, they're kind of rebuilding their wide receiver in. I think the position in Arizona, you mentioned, and what I did is they drafted 3 receivers, but they're all very different types of players, and they complement each other well. You mentioned Hakeem Butler, who's the big guy. You got Andy Isabella from UMass, who's more of the slot guy. And then you got Keyshawn Johnson from Fresno State, who's kind of the chain mover, possession guy. Clary's definitely rebuilding that offense and that passing attack. And Seattle, too. It looks like they're losing Doug Baldwin, and they're kind of bringing in some competition. They drafted 3 receivers, and certainly the biggest name is DK Metcalf. But like you said, Gary Jennings in the 4th round, a big play threat, super productive in that high-powered West Virginia offense. So it'll be interesting to see who emerges in that competition. And then Pittsburgh, you mentioned Benny Snell, the running back from Kentucky, going to come in as a really good backup and insurance option behind James Conner. And that's why for Pittsburgh, it wasn't a priority to go out and replace Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell this offseason because they've been consistently replacing them year to year. They drafted James Conner, drafted James Washington last year, and now again they brought in a wide receiver in the 3rd round, a running back in the 4th round, but they're always thinking ahead so that they have a replacement in-house when the time comes.
What happened with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson? Is this, hey, the rich got richer with the Saints getting another good player? Why was he slipping into round 4?
It was off-the-field concerns, and I had heard rumors of that before the draft, and they said if he does slide, that's the reason, because on talent alone, based on the film, he probably should have gone in the 2nd round. So he slid 2 full rounds, and the Saints got a really good value there, a versatile chess piece in the secondary that you can move around. So a really good pick. And I like what the Saints did with their first pick, too, getting Eric McCoy, the center from Texas A&M. They got kind of blindsided by Max Unger retiring, and they traded up to get McCoy. He's one of the few guys in this draft that's ready to come in and man that all-important pivot position for Drew Brees for a contender.
Scott Wright, draftcountdown.com, looking back at the draft. Round 5, interesting. Here locally, Raquel Armstead, he's from right up the road from us here in Millville, played at Temple, and he was a guy I thought that really helped himself with the Senior Bowl and then had a really good run in the workouts.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail right in the head with what happened there. Had a good week at the Senior Bowl and then worked out a lot better than anybody expected. Specifically, he ran better than everyone expected. He ran a 4.45, and I don't think he plays quite that fast, but that probably pushed him up around maybe 2 in the draft. And he's going to have an opportunity there. I always say with running backs, it's as much about situation opportunity as it is about talent. And I think it's safe to say Leonard Fournette is on very thin ice in Jacksonville. So keep an eye on Raquel Armstead. I mean, that's the type of mid-round pick. He could come in if he gets an opportunity. I mean, dark horse rookie of the year type sleeper, that type of situation, possibly.
Yeah, he's a guy that a lot of people thought, maybe been that 7th round, hey, we'll take a flyer. One problem with him, I guess, and you can probably attest this more, doesn't catch the ball all that much, but is a guy who is physical, but also, as you mentioned, showed that speed. He was one of the top 5 fastest backs, was he not?
Yeah, which surprises everyone because his reputation is kind of that of what I like to call a meat and potatoes runner. There's not a lot of flash to him, but you know what you're getting. So I think the question is how much upside is there. But I mean, in the right situation, he has a chance to be a productive runner. I mean, I think of an Alfred Morris type. I think he's a better prospect than Alfred Morris was coming out. So I think he could be that type of player and have that type of career. And I think he's going to get a shot in Jacksonville sooner rather than later.
Yeah. Now, as you get into the 6th and 7th round, was there any player in this draft that just slipped, as you mentioned, because of off-field concerns or anything that fell that deep into the draft? Or was, anything crazy about the 6th and 7th round? In years past, you see guys that just keep falling because of off-the-field guys who have been late picks that a lot of people say, man, I'm a 3rd rounder, and that they fell. Anybody last year's draft in those 2 rounds?
Yeah, and I'm cheating a little bit at the back end of round 5, but DeAndre Walker, the outside linebacker out of Georgia, if he hadn't been hurt during the pre-draft process, I think he might have been a second or a third rounder. So to get him at the back end of round 5 was a terrific value. And then in round 6, I think Lamont Galliard, the center out of Georgia. I had heard chatter that maybe he goes the back end of day 2, certainly early day 3. And Arizona, with all this offensive firepower they're bringing in, they need to fix that offensive line. And I think they might have got a long-term starter at their center position there. So those are two that definitely stand out. And in terms of the biggest reach for me was the Jacksonville Jaguars in round 3. They took Murray State outside linebacker Quincy Williams. And I hadn't heard at any point in the process him being talked about as anything more than a 7th-round draft pick, a priority free agent. So to take him in the 3rd round, that was the most eye-popping moment of the whole draft for me.
Yeah, I know the draft is an inexact science. Guys who get picked too high, picked too low. It's in the books here. Real quick, we know this year's quarterback class was kind of, if you like the guy, it didn't seem consensusly a great class. How about next year when we take a look at the quarterbacks? I'm sure you're already prepping for that.
No doubt, and we kind of always have eye on the year ahead. And a year ago at this time, we were talking about, it's going to be a great defensive line class. And sure enough, that's exactly what it was. I think a year from now, the storyline is going to be those quarterbacks. Tua Tagovailoa from Alabama, Jake Fromm from Georgia, Justin Herbert from Oregon, just to name a few. I think that's going to be the storyline, and some really terrific wide receiver prospects as well. This was kind of a down year in terms of the top-end talent, the wideout position, but next year is going to more than make up for it.
Speaking of wide receiver, I got to ask you, what happened with Dave Sills? Did you think that he would be undraftable? I mean, I know you had him 22nd on your board, but talking to a lot of people, I heard mostly 4th, 5th round on him, and he ends up signing as an undrafted guy with Buffalo.
I'm surprised, but certainly not shocked. And I remember talking with somebody down at the Senior Bowl, and I said the question I had with him, is he different than Jake Wieneke, who was a similar type of player a year ago out of South Dakota State, who was very productive, but it was just basically a red zone jump ball threat. And I think that was the concern with Sills. So, yeah, I was a little surprised that he went undrafted, but I said leading up that this is such a deep wide receiver class that even if it's a well above average number drafted at the position, there were still going to be 10 or 15 names that shocked everybody, and I think that held true.
Any undrafted guys to keep an eye on? If your team signs one of these guys, you might have found a diamond in the rough.
Miami Dolphins fans, you got one. Terrell Hanks, the outside linebacker out of New Mexico State. He was my top-ranked undrafted free agent. I really kind of fell in love with this guy down at the Senior Bowl. He's a former safety, so he's that modern-day linebacker you look for. Ran really poorly. He ran 4.9. I don't know what happened there. He plays way faster than that. I don't know if it was bad technique or if he was hurt or what happened. Maybe there was some medical issue there that I don't know about that led to him going undrafted.
DraftCountdown.com, 360 days, 4 hours, and 35 minutes. Where's it, Vegas next year?
Vegas, baby.
All right. Maybe we'll all have to go out there next year for that one. Scott Wright, DraftCountdown.com. Another great year, another great job, Scott. We always appreciate it, pal.
Anytime, man. Thanks for having me.